I told my family that we needed to downsize our lifestyle if they wanted me to pay their mortgage. Then I came home to find the locks changed and my suitcases thrown outside. Think about your behavior, I thought, and I decided to do just that. So there I was, living my best life at 28. My name is Anita, and honestly, things were pretty good for me back then. I had this decent job at a big company, nothing fancy, but it paid the bills, and then some. I made good money, enough to rent a nice little apartment downtown and still have cash left over for the things I wanted. I'd been dreaming of buying my own place for months. You know how it is? Tired of throwing money away on rent every month when I could be building equity in something that was actually mine. So I opened this savings account specifically for my future house. Every month, I'd put whatever I could save into that account. Watching those numbers grow was amazing. I was actually making progress, you know? My apartment wasn't huge, but it was mine. Well, not really mine, since I was renting, but you get what I mean. I could come home after work, kick off my shoes, order takeout if I didn't feel like cooking, and nobody bothered me. It was peaceful. I had my routine down. Work during the week, maybe go out with friends on weekends, catch up on Netflix, whatever I wanted. Life felt stable for the first time in years. I wasn't constantly stressed about money like I used to be when I was younger. I could actually plan for the future instead of just surviving paycheck to paycheck. The savings account was proof of that. Every deposit felt like I was getting closer to something real. Then my mom called. It was a Tuesday night. I remember because I was watching a cooking show and thinking about what to make for dinner when I saw her name on my phone. I almost didn't answer, not because I didn't want to talk to her, but because she usually called on weekends. A Tuesday call felt different somehow. Anita, honey, we need to talk, she said as soon as I answered. Her voice sounded strange, shaky, like she'd been crying or was about to start. What's wrong, Mom? I asked, muting the TV. Can you come over tonight? Your father and I need to discuss something important with you. I knew I wasn't going to get any more information out of her over the phone, so I grabbed my keys and drove over to my parents' house. It's about 20 minutes from my apartment, in this suburban neighborhood where I grew up. Nothing fancy, but it's a nice area with decent houses and good schools. When I walked in, both my parents were sitting at the kitchen table. Mom's eyes were red and puffy, and Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years since the last time I saw him a few weeks ago. There were tissues scattered on the table and 2 empty coffee mugs. Sit down, honey, Mom said, gesturing to the chair across from them. I sat, feeling more nervous by the second. Okay, what's going on? You're scaring me. Dad cleared his throat and looked down at his hands. I'm being laid off. The words hit me like a punch in the gut. My dad had worked at the same manufacturing plant for almost 20 years. He was reliable, showed up every day, never caused any trouble. How could they just get rid of him? What? When? What? I stammered. End of next month, he said quietly. They're shutting down our whole department, moving operations overseas where it's cheaper. 47 people are losing their jobs. Mom reached over and took his hand. That's not all, honey. I looked at her, dreading what was coming next. I've been having these health problems, she continued. My back pain has gotten so much worse, and the doctor says I need to cut back my hours at work. I can't do full shifts at the restaurant anymore. Some days I can barely stand for more than a few hours. I felt like the room was spinning. Both my parents losing income at the same time. What about unemployment benefits? And can't the doctor help with your back? Dad shook his head. Unemployment won't cover nearly enough, and your mother's been seeing doctors for months. They say she needs surgery, but even with insurance, we can't afford it right now. We're already behind on the mortgage payments, Mom added, her voice cracking. 2 months behind. If we can't catch up soon, we could lose the house. The house I grew up in, the house they'd been paying off for 15 years. The thought of them losing it made me sick. How much do you need? I asked, even though I was pretty sure I didn't want to know the answer. $800 a month just for the mortgage, Dad said. Plus utilities, food, your mom's medical bills, $1,800. That was more than half my monthly take-home pay. But looking at their faces, the faces of my parents who had raised me, fed me, supported me through college, I couldn't say no. Okay, I heard myself say. I'll help with the mortgage. Just temporarily, until Dad finds another job and Mom gets better. The relief on their faces was immediate. Mom started crying again, but they were happy tears this time. Dad got up and hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. Thank you, my girl, he whispered. We'll pay you back as soon as we get back on our feet. I nodded, but inside I was already doing the math. $800 for their mortgage, plus my own rent, plus all my other expenses. My savings account was going to stop growing. In fact, I'd probably have to dip into it just to make ends meet. But they were my parents. Family helps family, right? That's what I told myself as I wrote them a check that night for the first mortgage payment. The first few months of helping my parents were brutal. What started as just the $800 mortgage payment quickly turned into a bottomless pit of money. Their water heater broke, then the refrigerators started acting up, then the roof leaked during a storm. Every few weeks there was another emergency, another expense that fell on my shoulders. Dad eventually found a job as a security guard at a local grocery store, but it was minimum wage, night shifts, basically peanuts compared to what he used to make at the plant. Mom's back kept getting worse, and she could barely work half shifts at the restaurant. Some days she'd come home crying from the pain. After 4 months of this, I was drowning. I'd already burned through $5,000 of my savings, and I was dipping into what was left just to cover my own rent and basic expenses. I couldn't keep living in my apartment and supporting them at the same time. When my parents suggested I move back home temporarily to save on rent, I knew I didn't have a choice. Just temporarily, Mom had said, until we get back on our feet. So there I was, at 28, moving back into my childhood bedroom like some kind of failure. I kept telling myself it was temporary, just until they recovered. My parents were actually pretty grateful for the whole arrangement. Mom cooked dinner every night, and I have to admit, it was nice coming home after work and not having to think about what to eat. For about 2 months, we had a decent routine going. I was supporting the family entirely financially, but at least I wasn't wasting money on rent anymore. Dad worked his security job, Mom did what she could at the restaurant, and I covered everything else. It wasn't ideal, but it was manageable. Then one day I came home from work and saw suitcases in the living room. My older brother, Jack, was sitting on the couch with his wife, Sarah, and their 3-year-old son, Tommy. I hadn't seen them in months, as they lived about 2 hours away in another city. Jack looked embarrassed, Sarah looked annoyed, and Tommy was running around the room like a maniac. "What's going on?" I asked, looking at all the luggage. Jack rubbed his neck. "I got laid off last week. We couldn't afford the rent, so we're going to stay here for a while, until I find something else." My parents were practically beaming with excitement about having their grandson in the house. They immediately asked me to move into the smaller guest room so Jack's family could have my bigger room, because apparently having a toddler meant they needed more space than the person who was paying all the bills. Life got chaotic really fast. Tommy cried constantly, especially at night. The kid had serious sleeping problems, and the walls in that house were thin. I was getting maybe 4 hours of sleep a night, and then dragging myself to work the next day feeling like death. Jack spent his days half-heartedly looking for work, while Sarah complained about everything. The house was too small, the neighborhood was boring, there wasn't enough hot water for everyone to shower. Meanwhile, I was getting requests for more money, because now there were 7 people living in the house instead of 4. "We're going to need more for groceries now," Mom told me one morning. "With 7 people, the food budget is getting really tight." I did the math one night and realized that my entire monthly salary was going towards supporting the family, every single penny. My dreams of buying a house were completely dead at this point. At least I still had my $50,000 in savings that I refused to touch, but everything else was gone. Jack eventually got a part-time job at some warehouse, but he only worked mornings. He claimed he was using his afternoons to look for a better job, but most of the time he and Sarah would go visit friends or hang out at the mall, leaving Tommy with my parents. Then I started noticing Sarah's shopping habits. She'd come home with expensive handbags, new clothes, jewelry, designer stuff that cost more than I spent on food in a month. When I asked her about it, she got nasty. "Where did you get the money for that purse?" I asked her one day when she walked in with another shopping bag. "That's none of your business," she snapped. "I don't have to explain my purchases to you." That's when I went to Mom and asked her how much Jack was actually contributing to the household expenses. "How much is Jack giving you for rent and food?" I asked her when we were alone in the kitchen. Mom got really uncomfortable and looked away. "Well, he can't really contribute right now. His job doesn't pay much, and they have their own expenses. So let me get this straight. I was working full-time and spending my entire salary on supporting 7 people, including Jack's family, while his wife was blowing his paycheck on luxury goods." The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I brought it up at dinner one night. "Jack, Don't you think you should be contributing something to the household budget? I said, I mean, we're all living together, and Sarah is buying expensive things while I'm paying for everyone's food. The second I mentioned that maybe Jack should contribute something to the household budget instead of letting his wife spend it all on designer purses, all hell broke loose. Jack started yelling, "Mind your own damn business, Anita. What I do with my money is none of your concern." Sarah was nodding along. She's just greedy and obsessed with money. It's all about dollars and cents with her. I'm the only one bringing any money into this house. I shot back. Of course I care where it's going. My parents, instead of backing me up, took their side. They said I was being ungrateful and that helping family was my duty, not something to brag about. "Let's all go get pizza and discuss this like adults," Jack said, getting up from the table. Of course, by all, he meant everyone but me. My parents, Jack, and Sarah all grabbed their coats and headed for the door. They left Tommy behind because apparently a 3-year-old would ruin their nice, relaxing dinner conversation. So there I was, alone in the house with a cranky toddler who wasn't even my kid, while the rest of my family went out to eat on my dime and probably complained about how unreasonable I was being. I sat on the couch, watching Tommy play with his toys, and realized just how screwed up this whole situation had become. I was basically a living ATM who also provided free babysitting services, and somehow I was the bad guy for asking questions about where the money was going. The next few months were hell. Jack kept his part-time job at the warehouse, but he never seemed to actually look for anything better. He and Sarah would disappear for hours, supposedly job hunting, but they always came back with shopping bags. Sarah kept buying expensive designer stuff while I paid for everything. The mortgage, the utilities, the food, you name it. December rolled around, and I was completely burnt out, working full-time, and then coming home to a house full of people who treated me like garbage even though I was funding their entire existence. One Saturday morning, Mom knocked on my door, asking me to come downstairs for a family meeting. Everyone was already in the living room when I got there. "We were just talking about plans for Christmas vacation," Mom said with a fake smile. I almost laughed. "What vacation? We can barely afford to keep the lights on." "That's what we wanted to discuss," Dad said. "We think the family should take a real vacation this year. Hawaii would be perfect." "Hawaii?" I stared at them. "Are you serious?" Sarah leaned forward, all excited. "There are some really good deals right now, and it would be amazing for Tommy to see the ocean." "How much?" I asked, dreading the answer. "About $5,000 for all of us," Mom said. "We know you have that savings account with $50,000. $5,000 isn't that much compared to what you have saved." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They wanted me to blow my house savings on a family vacation to Hawaii. The money I had been saving for years, before this whole mess started. "That money is for buying a house," I said slowly. "It's not vacation money." "But we're family," Sarah said. "Don't you think we deserve a break after such a hard year?" "Hard year?" I looked at her. "You haven't worked a single day since you moved in here. You spend Jack's paycheck on designer handbags while I pay for your food and shelter." Jack's face turned red. There she goes again with the money thing. Yes, the money thing. Because I'm the only one who cares about money in this house. I literally pay for everything. "That's what family does," Mom said. "And now we're asking you to help us make some good memories together." "The answer is no," I said firmly. "I'm not spending my house money on your vacation. Figure out a way to pay for it yourselves." Everyone stared at me like I had slapped them. The room went dead silent, except for Tommy playing with his toys. "Think about it," Mom said finally. "Christmas is about family. Maybe you'll change your mind." "I won't change my mind. I'm already spending every penny I make on this family. My savings are off limits." I went to my room and slammed the door. I could hear them talking downstairs, probably discussing how selfish and bitchy I was for not wanting to fund their dream vacation. That was Saturday. Sunday was tense, with everyone giving me dirty looks and making snide comments. I figured they'd eventually get over it, and we'd go back to the usual routine of me paying for everything while they complained about my attitude. Monday morning, I went to work as usual. It had been a long day, and I was looking forward to getting home, eating Mom's cooking, and maybe watching some TV before bed. At least there were some small perks to living at home, even if everything else sucked. But as I pulled into the driveway, something seemed wrong. There were garbage bags by the front door. As I got closer, I realized they weren't garbage bags. They were my things, my clothes, my books, my personal belongings, all stuffed into plastic bags like I was trash. I tried to put my key in the front door, but it wouldn't turn. They had changed the locks. I started banging on the door. What the hell is going on? Open the door. After a few minutes, the door opened a crack, held back by the chain lock. Mom's face appeared in the gap, and I could see Dad, Jack, and Sarah standing behind her. What is this? I asked, gesturing to the bags. Why are my things outside? Mom's voice was cold. We've decided you need to think about your behavior. You're being selfish and ungrateful, putting money before family. You're kicking me out because I won't pay for your vacation? We're giving you time to think, Dad said from behind her. When you realize that family comes first and you're willing to help us with the Hawaii trip, then we can talk about you coming back. I stared at them through that little crack in the door. These people, the people I had been supporting for months, who had been living off my salary, were literally kicking me out because I wouldn't raid my savings account for their vacation. Are you serious? I said. You're really kicking me out. Think about what's really important, Mom said. We'll be waiting for you to come to your senses. Then she shut the door in my face. I stood there for a minute, staring at my belongings scattered in garbage bags, trying to process what had just happened. My own parents had locked me out of their house because I wouldn't give them $5,000 for a vacation. At first I wanted to cry, then I wanted to pound on the door and scream at them, but then something strange happened. I started to smile. Then I started to laugh. They thought they were punishing me, but they had actually just done something I had been too guilt-ridden and too trapped in family obligation to do for myself. They had set me free. I loaded all my stuff into my car and drove to my friend Lisa's house. She had a spare room and had always said I could stay there if I needed to. When I showed up with my suitcases and explained what had happened, she just shook her head. Your family is insane, she said, helping me carry things inside. But honestly, this might be the best thing that could have happened to you. That night, sleeping in Lisa's guest room, I felt better than I had in months. I was free, and it felt amazing. I spent the next few days at Lisa's, and it was like waking up from a nightmare. No one asking me for money. No crying baby keeping me awake. No passive-aggressive comments about family duty. I could think clearly for the first time in months. Lisa had this big house with plenty of space, and she made it clear I could stay as long as I needed. But I didn't want to be a burden on anyone else, so I started looking for apartments right away. It felt weird looking at rental listings again after living at home, but also exciting. I could actually afford a decent place now that I wasn't supporting 7 people. Within a few days, I found a nice one-bedroom apartment in a good neighborhood. The rent was reasonable, and I put down a deposit immediately. Moving in was the best feeling in the world. My own space again, my own rules, my own life. I could eat what I wanted, watch what I wanted, sleep when I wanted. No one could ask me for money or make me feel guilty for having boundaries. For a whole week, it was blissful peace and quiet. No phone calls, no texts, nothing from my family. I started to think that maybe they really would stick to their guns and leave me alone until I came crawling back with my checkbook. Then the mortgage payment was due. My phone rang on a Tuesday morning. Mom's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Anita, honey, it's time for the mortgage payment, she said like nothing had happened. Like they hadn't kicked me out of their house a week ago. I started laughing. Are you serious right now? What do you mean? The payment is due, and we expect the usual amount. Mom, you kicked me out, changed the locks, and threw my things in garbage bags. Why would you think I'd still be paying your bills? There was silence on the other end. Then Mom's voice turned panicky. But we don't have the money for the mortgage. You know we can't pay it without your help. You should have thought about that before you decided to punish me for not funding your Hawaiian vacation. Anita, please, this isn't the time to be petty. We could lose the house. Then maybe Jack should get a full-time job, or Sarah could stop buying designer purses and contribute something. You have options, you just don't want to use them. But Christmas is coming, Mom said, her voice getting all soft and manipulative. This isn't a time for family to be fighting. We should be together, working things out. You're right, it's not a time for fighting. So I'm not going to fight with you. I'm just also not going to pay your bills anymore. What if we all sat down and talked about this? You could come home, and we could start over. Absolutely not. I'm not coming back, and I'm not giving you another penny. You made your decision when you kicked me out. Mom was silent for a long moment. You can't be serious. I'm dead serious. Goodbye, Mom. I hung up immediately, blocked her number. Then I blocked Dad's number, Jack's number, and Sarah's number 2. Blocked them on social media. I was done with all of them. They tried calling from different numbers for a while, leaving voicemails and sending texts, all with the same emotional blackmail about family obligations and how selfish I was being. I deleted it all without reading or listening. After a few weeks, the calls stopped. I guess they finally realized I wasn't going to budge. It's been several months since I moved out. My life is completely different, and I love it. I'm saving money again, actually saving it, not just watching it disappear into the family black hole. My savings account is growing for the first time in over a year. I hear things through relatives sometimes. Mom and Dad had to get extra jobs to cover the bills. Dad's working 2 part-time jobs now, and Mom's pushing herself to work more hours despite her back problems. Jack finally got a full-time job because he didn't have a choice anymore. Apparently, they complain about me constantly, calling me selfish and ungrateful. But here's the thing. They're not starving, they're not homeless. They figured out how to manage when they had to. They just preferred having me as their personal ATM because it was easier. My cousin told me they've been bad-mouthing me to the whole extended family, trying to make me look like the villain. Some relatives have contacted me to tell me I should reconcile with my parents. That family is more important than money. I just tell them they're welcome to start paying my parents' mortgage if they're so concerned. The funny thing is, I'm not even angry anymore. At first I was furious about how they used me and treated me, but now I mostly just feel relieved. They did me a huge favor by kicking me out. I never would have had the guts to leave on my own. I was too caught up in the guilt and family obligation. I've started dating again, something I couldn't even think about when I was supporting 7 people and living in my childhood bedroom. I'm making plans for the future, looking at houses again. My $50,000 is still there, untouched, earning interest while I add more to it every month. I sometimes wonder if they'll ever apologize or admit they were wrong, but honestly, I don't think I want them back in my life even if they do. They showed me who they really are when they thought they could manipulate and control me with guilt and family pressure. I'm happier now than I've been in years. I have my own place, my own money, my own choices. No one can make me feel guilty for having boundaries or for wanting to keep the money I earn. My parents taught me an important lesson, just not the one they intended. They taught me that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who will take advantage of you the most. And they taught me that I'm stronger than I thought. I don't need their approval or their presence in my life to be happy. I'm doing just fine on my own. Thank you very much.